And we're back. Welcome to episode 56 in the car of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I want to thank you all. You're joining me today on the YouTube channel on this Saturday afternoon into evening in New York. Don't forget to click like, subscribe, and if you haven't done so already, turn on those notifications. Or if you're joining me for the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or the other platforms, same rule applies. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to click like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. So I'm going to pick up this narrative where I left off in episode 51, which was kind of more tales from the Hollywood trenches, where what appeared to be a phenomenal career opportunity, getting a YA Tittle project kind of falling into my lap, didn't work out. It kind of blew up in my face. I was left holding the bag. It was a very difficult thing for me to try to get over. In some ways, I'm still not over it all these years later, because in any business, whether you're a writer, whether you're an attorney, whether you're an accountant, anything, when you know you did the work, when you know you put in the work, and shit happens, and you can look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, I did not create this problem. I did my part. I put my trust and faith. And see, that's one of the problems with this particular business, is you really can't go it alone. And you can, theoretically, you can write alone, but you can't go it alone because it is a collaborative business. It is a business which relies on other people. Even the sort of magician level writer-directors from Quentin Tarantino, Woody Allen, and people in that ballpark who are so talented, it's still collaborative. You know, and in the case of Tarantino, a story which I told on a previous podcast, where the kind of lucky break. Now, Tarantino was going to get discovered one way or another. He was too good to not be eventually discovered, but he was discovered because Harvey Keitel's wife happened to be teaching an acting class, which he took, and he managed to get what became Reservoir Dogs to Harvey Keitel. So there's that. But when you're in a situation where you are hired, as I was plucked out of the blue to do this YA Tittle project. I was brought on board, and then shit went haywire. It's rough, you know, and I don't, because I would say in most cases, you can look at yourself and say, hey, I could have done more, or I didn't handle this correctly. All right, I could be saying to myself right now, I could have written a better script. Yeah, I'm sure I could have, but I know that I produced quality material. And my perception then and now is that I was let down by the people who were in position to make sure that I did not get screwed. So with the sort of airing of grievances, you know, it's a little late for that, Festivus, I continue to believe that I had turned in, you know, quality work. Now, you see, because people nice you to death, there is a version of this where the script that I turned in sucked, and people just told me it was good to placate me, but deep down they're like, he don't got it. He's no good. And that's why the project fell apart. But I don't believe that. There were people who had no reason to be full of crap. I feel like it was a quality piece of work, and circumstances just unfortunately turned against me. And that's Hollywood. That even at the outer edges, you know, it's almost like what people would say, well, that happens on Broadway, happens on off-Broadway, happens on off-Broadway. You never know how things are going to play out. Again, that's why you don't spend money before you've made it, but also why you have contingency plans. And if you really believe in yourself, that you keep moving forward, you stay on the grind. You know, like workout trainees and people who are fitness addicts and into it, we have the same mindset for that. There are going to be setbacks. There can be a lot of setbacks, perhaps injuries, perhaps health and family complications make it so much more difficult to get in your sessions, even if you're fortunate as I am to have equipment at home. you just have to not give up and keep pushing and keep trying, keep moving forward. I mean, it's advice for life. It's so many different forms and applications, whether it's professional, whether it's personal. You always have to keep your nose to the grindstone, even if shit goes wrong. Even if you played a major role in shit going wrong, right? It's possible, as I said, maybe. But so I continue to do that. I continue to believe that the work that I had already produced was solid. You know, I'm not and never could be a Stephen King or an M. Night Shyamalan, a Bruce Joel Rubin, a William Goldman. But just because you're not Mozart doesn't mean you can't be Salieri. And sometimes it's okay to just be good. You don't have to be the best. You can just be a craftsman, a guy who has talent and works hard. You know, not every baseball player is Alex Rodriguez when he was 20, or actually more like when he was 15, hitting a ball 400 feet. Some people just have the magic. And some people just okay what they do. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, it doesn't mean never the twain shall meet. So you just keep going and you keep trying to improve your craft, find good stories, and let the chips fall where they may. So I continue to submit, not the YA Tittle Project, but I submitted other works which I had completed, including An Empty Place, the Brooklyn Dodger screenplay, that other project which kind of blew up in my face. And I answered, it's kind of funny to think in terms of a want ad, but I was on one of the screenwriter message boards, again, quite some time ago, and what amounted to a classified, where it was a filmmaker who had financing for an independent, a proposed independent film, and he explained it very concisely. He said, I have a financier. He's willing to go as high as $3 million for the budget, and he wants to make a movie about the Jewish immigrant experience in specifically New York City in the first quarter of the 20th century. And so that he was looking for writers who were, I hate to say it, who were either Jewish or had already written about characters who were Jewish. In other words, that they were conversant to some extent in the religion and some of the implications for what would have been Jewish people in that time frame. So they didn't write it in a controversial way. I'm just, I'm laying out that sometimes producers and directors, they want a certain kind of writer to do this certain kind of story. It's really just that simple. So I pitched An Empty Place, which, although the religious aspect it's not really beating you over the head, but it is a Jewish immigrant family. It is written into the script, and there is one quick scene where they are a temple. That's it, though. They're not defined by their religion or anything like that. To make judgments, but they're not. They happen to be Jewish, as opposed to their religion being a big part of that story. That's how I would describe it. So the guy asks to read An Empty Place, and I send him. It might have been the first time that I emailed a script, now that I'm thinking about it. Up till that point, I'd still been sending out hard copies. Guy gets back to me within a couple of days and says words to the effect of, "Holy shit, can I hire you? And who owns this property?" Meaning An Empty Place. "Yes, you can hire me. I know your credits. I saw some of your music." He was a guy who had done some music videos also. And no, it's not under option. It really hasn't been seen by that many people, but it's not under option. If you want to take a crack at that too, you're more than welcome. And then we kind of went from there. So he explained that the financier, who was like a Wall Street hedge fund, I know that's a cliche, but he's a hedge fund guy, came from a 3-generation family of Jewish immigrants, where he, I believe, was the first to be born in this country. And he didn't have a specific narrative in mind other than the sort of broad, I wanted to deal with the Jewish immigrant experience in the first quarter of the 20th century in New York. So that didn't mean it had to be set in the kind of cliche, the Lower East Side. It didn't have to be set in the Bronx or Harlem or Midtown Manhattan. He just wanted a story. It seemed pretty, straightforward. So I took the gig, and, we signed paperwork, and I start fantasizing again, making a mistake. How much money I'll make if it's a $3 million budget. I'll be guaranteed this and guaranteed this number of rewrites, and I can't help myself from breaking my own rule, which I had back then, which my first literary agent, the late, great Bennett Sims, told me, don't do that, Jer, don't do that. But I did it. But that being said, I go to work doing research to try to get it together, at least structurally in my head, what I'm going to do as far as story, because he didn't have any markers. He didn't say it's got to follow one family, it's got to follow 30 families, it has to be set in 1909, nothing. So I start imagining an ensemble story with multiple families living in the same building, and each are at different phases of the immigrant process, or immigrant experience if you prefer. Meaning, some families are thriving, other families are in big trouble in every way, and then there are a few in the middle. And the general idea, what I knew I wanted to do, I wanted to carry it out with a kind of Pulp Fiction structure, in a sense that I was going to tell the story, each family's story in turn. So for example, if there are 6 families in my story that are being focused on, I'm going to start at a certain point and end at a certain point 6 different times. The focus is going to be different. And characters who don't seem particularly important in story 1 end up being critically important in stories 4, 5, and 6. So this was all stuff that I began working on, kicking around to say, okay, we're going to have this family, and this is their issue, this is their issue. So I do character biographies. I put in almost as much research as I had done on the Y.A. Tittle project, and also kind of almost as much research, because this research was a little bit different, because once I had the historical background, then I was just making characters up. The Brooklyn Dodger script also was a lot of research, but most of that research was what was the world really like in 1955, and what were the historical things that I need to include in the script, which, as we say, included the death, unfortunately, of James Dean. I got all of the character bios down. I figured out the names of the members of each family, and I wrote it out in treatment form. A treatment is, it's not a book, it's not a screenplay. It would read like a condensed novel. And the treatment I put together in a chronological fashion, just to get it down. And I sent it, it was about 20 pages. But in the treatment was probably 80% or more of what ended up in my screenplay. So I sent it to the filmmaker, and he got back to me an hour later, and he was over the moon. Because I'd only been, he'd only met me on the phone a couple of weeks prior. He could not believe that I had come up with this. He was just absolutely incredulous. Like, how did you do this? How did you do this so quickly? Well, it was serious. The key thing was my grandfather, may he rest in peace, Nathan Cohen, Dad's dad, was still alive, still in bristling good health. He was 93, he was 90, not 93. This was in 2003. He was 90. He had turned 90. And he grew up in Harlem, when a lot of Harlem was Jewish. So he gave me the kind of background that you can't really get in a book. You might accidentally stumble into it in a book, but it's not something that you can necessarily Google. The stuff that he told me about what the streets looked like, the pushcart peddlers all over the block, the people whose clothes were hand-me-downs that were being held together by tape or by thimbles, like just awful stuff like that. So that kind of grounded it in reality. Cast iron coal stoves. A 6-story building would have 1 bathroom per floor, maybe 2 showers in the basement, maybe, but no showers on the floor, certainly none in the apartments. So the filmmaker read my treatment and was over the moon. He said, I don't know how you did this. This is extraordinary. I can't wait. I'm going to send it to, I think the guy's name was Al. I'm going to send it to Al. I'll let you know what he says, but I think, you're going to be starting work on the screenplay within a couple of days. Are you ready? What else is going on? You're like, normal stuff. He said, no. As soon as I get to go ahead, we're going to put pen to paper, so to speak, and I can start writing immediately. It's no problem. I already did the work. I did the character bios. I know who's in which family. I know who does what in which family. The rest of it is just almost taking dictation from myself. So I was very confident. Filmmaker calls me back later in the day, and he is very upset. He's like, I don't know what the hell just happened, but I just talked to Al. He read your treatment, and he does not like it. He thinks that it's all bad, and he's in shock that I think it's brilliant. So unfortunately, hold on. Unfortunately, what looked like, and up until this moment, was can't miss, because hey, I've got $3 million to make a movie. As long as I like the story ideas, as long as I like what you're going to do, we're good to go. So now suddenly the financier is saying, I don't like any of this. And the director is flabbergasted because, bro, this is exactly what you asked for. It's like he was reading your mind. This is what you told me you wanted. You wanted a multi-angle story. You wanted people at different levels of the experience. He gave you what you asked for. Well, I know that, but I just don't like it. He just didn't like it. So go back and forth, and he says, you know what, I'm going to try to talk some sense into him, do this whole rigmarole. He's not able to make any headway. The guy won't even commission me to try a different treatment. We'll have to pay him again, whatever. He loses all faith in the project and just says, you know what, maybe this was a stupid idea. I think what happened was he might have had a bad couple of weeks on Wall Street and lost $500,000 or $1 million and just didn't think that it was such a great idea to spend $3 million making a movie. I think the guy was full of crap. But that's neither here nor there. The filmmaker apologized profusely. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and write my screenplay here because I already did the work. So let me just go ahead and write my screenplay. So yet again, left holding the bag when other people did stuff that was unexpected. And I set forth to write a screenplay, which is set during the winter of 1917. It's 6 weeks in November and December of 1917, following these 6 recently immigrated Jewish families living in the same tenement building on 121st Street in Harlem. And so I wrote the script, I edited it, I took it down to a length, again, 110 to 115 pages. The story has a nice build to it, even though a lot of the same events are repeated. They're repeated from different perspectives, like a Pulp Fiction, or that kind of a story that has a little bit of a flashback, Usual Suspects, from which perspective, or Rashomon if you prefer, a little Kurosawa reference. But I finished a draft that I was comfortable with. I sent it out to a couple of people I knew. And again, the buzz was really solid, like really strong. This is better than the Brooklyn script. This is terrific. Someone will definitely pick this up. Again, I take everything with a grain of salt, right? Even back then, because people that care about you are usually not going to tell you if something sucks. But I had the idea that it was good. You know, that Empty Place is solid, Giants and Heroes was solid, and I felt like this one was a quality piece of work too. There's a lot of great, again, historical stuff, and felt like the characters came across as real and realistic for the time, for 1917. And I sent it to a New York production company that had I think they may have had a deal with Fine Line Features, which was an offshoot of the old New Line Cinema, which was a super successful company. Originally did the Nightmare on Elm Street films. And one of the creative executives was a huge fan of this script that I wrote, and he said that it was like award-worthy stuff. Now, when I say award-worthy stuff, I'm not talking Oscars. He meant that film festivals, screenwriting festivals, that this is the kind of story that places high, put it that way. That's what he was referring to. He wasn't like trying to overstate the case or gas me up or anything. His company wasn't really in a position to do anything with it. But, you know, so this guy and we stayed in touch, and he sent me his coverage, which was like 3 pages of like a love letter. He thought almost everything in the script was great. He loved the story, the individual stories, the way that there was still a build, like there was an overall arc, even though you're essentially resetting the Matrix 5 times after you reset it the first time. But that project never got anywhere. The Harlem 1917 project, it never got a toehold anywhere. There were people who told me, wow, this is really terrific, but it was almost the kind of cliche of, this is really good, but it's never going to get made. But that's what I was told. We like it, we can't do anything with it. Good luck getting somebody who would be interested in this very narrow, niche-y story. Good luck. And they were being earnest. This is not the kind of script that people are ever going to be breaking down walls to make. It's just not. It's a very particular audience and a very particular kind of producer who would want to get involved in something like this. Want to make a period piece on a small budget. It's easier said than done. That is not easy. You know, you're going to have to try to keep limit on locations. As a writer, I wasn't thinking about that. Because, you know, you're just trying to tell a story, right? You're just trying to tell a story. A David Mamet, the understatements of all time. I'm just trying to tell a story. I'm just trying to tell a story. So, a couple of years ago, after literally nobody having seen this script in, I don't know how many years, a decade? Close to it, probably. I rolled that and Giants and Heroes and An Empty Place, the Brooklyn Dodgers script. I started entering them into film festivals and screenwriting festivals in the hope that if I either won, quote unquote, or placed highly in, you know, a reasonably large festival, that somebody at the festival, somebody, like let's say a producer or a creative executive who was reading for the festival, would take an interest and say, hey, I want to get involved. I want to produce this. I think this will make a great movie. I think we could get it done on the cheap or whatever. So I placed highly. All 3 of those scripts did well at a number of different, fairly important screenwriting and or film festivals. Didn't win. The best I did, I finished in the top 8 San Francisco International Film Festival. 2 of my scripts ended up in the top 8. So yeah, I got commendation, I got a nice little ribbons and all kinds of other nonsense, poster if I wanted it. The Chicago Film Festival, I I made another like final 6 with Harlem 1917, but I didn't get anything out of it. My purpose for entering those festivals was not just for the feather in the cap of, hey, I made the finals. No, it was very specific. I want somebody to read this and say, hey, I can make this movie. And when that didn't happen, after months of placing highly, all 3 of those scripts, I mean, Giants and Heroes nearly won a festival in California. Not one of the biggest ones, but it ended up, I was a finalist and I got some kind of commendations and whatnot, but it didn't go anywhere. And the whole point was not just for fun, not just to puff out my chest, but the whole idea is to get these made, get them somewhere, as opposed to just sitting in my hard drive doing nothing and me, wondering, geez, got real close here. Too bad, right? So I kind of stopped entering them into film festivals, and I still send the work around, but it is as I say, a failure-based business is Hollywood and is writing in general. You're going to be told no a lot more than you're going to be told yes. And you need to have a thick skin. And as an older person, I have a thicker skin. I don't take rejection as personal as I used to. It doesn't cut the way that it did, let's say, when I was in my 20s. I was, a much younger kind of angrier personality. But that script, I believe, is high quality. It's a good story, and I think that it would make for a good movie. But there are certain kinds of stories that are universal that almost everybody would kind of be interested in or say, hey, this would make a good movie. And then you have ones that when you pitch, they're like, well, who would ever want to see this? But the person who wants to do it is in the business and knows how to do it and gets it done. Like, out of context, if anybody other than Ron Howard and Brian Grazer, almost a quarter of a century ago, walks into the offices at Universal, now Grazer, of course, had offices there, but walks in and says, we got an idea for a great movie. And they say, oh, okay, Ron, Brian, hit me with it. What is it? It's about a mathematician who wins the Nobel Prize. That doesn't sound that great to me, but obviously Ron Howard and Brian Grazer knew how to make it great. And there's A Beautiful Mind. And that's where A Beautiful Mind got its start. From a pitch that didn't really sound that interesting, it ended up becoming Oscar winner, multiple Oscar winner. So that's the thing. You never know what's going to happen. You don't ever quit. You don't ever stop writing. You don't ever stop working. And you don't ever stop shooting for the stars. Because you shoot for the stars, you could miss, maybe only get 70% of the way there. That's still okay. It's a process. You just keep grinding it out, keep trying, keep working, and that's it. And at the end of the day, great cliche, at the end of the day, you're another day older, but at the end of the day, you could look yourself in the mirror and say, I didn't leave anything on the table. I gave this everything I had. And I can say with certainty that in the case of Harlem 1917, I gave it everything I had. Just wasn't in the cards. And with that, as night falls in New York on this Saturday evening, we've reached the end of the Joe DiMaggio Hitting Streak episode number 56 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I want to thank you for accompanying me on my drive westward on this Saturday evening. If you're checking out the YouTube channel and you haven't done so already, don't forget to click like, subscribe, turn on those notifications. Or if you're listening to the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or the other platforms, don't forget to click like, subscribe, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back real soon with episode 57. Take care and have a great Saturday night.